All right, so today we're going to dive into this conflict brewing in Los Angeles over a new subway line. But the story we're about to unpack, it goes so much deeper than just tracks and tunnels. This is really about the true cost of progress. And more importantly, who's being asked to pay that price. Yeah, see, this really isn't a story about a subway. At its heart, this is a story about a community, it's about history, and it's about a question that cities all across America are having to face over and over again. Who gets to benefit from all this development, and who gets stuck with the burden? And for the residents of one particular neighborhood, that question feels incredibly personal. It feels deeply unfair. This quote here from a community member, wow, it just cuts right to the chase. It frames their fight not as some simple planning dispute, but as a real issue of justice. Okay, so let's get to know the community right at the center of this storm, Lafayette Square. And look, this isn't just any old collection of houses. This is a neighborhood with a really profound history, and right now, it's facing what it sees as nothing less than an existential threat. So Lafayette Square is a really unique and frankly vulnerable community. I mean, it's an officially designated historic zone. We're talking about homes that are over a century old. It's also been a predominantly African-American neighborhood since way back in the 1940s. And yet, LA Metro's current plan is to tunnel directly underneath about 22 of these historic single-family homes. But the threat? It isn't just underground. The project would also mean demolishing the area's only full-service grocery store. The kind with a real butcher, a bakery, all the fresh produce. And on top of that, its only nearby drugstore. For this community, these aren't just convenient little shops. They are absolutely essential, daily lifelines. And this loss of essential services, well, it brings us right to the core of the community's whole argument, this idea of an unequaled burden. To really get what's going on here, we have to compare who's gaining from this project versus who's losing. And this table, it just lays the disparity out so clearly. The new line, it's designed to give more access and convenience to communities like West Hollywood. And hey, that's a fine goal, right? But just look at the numbers. West Hollywood, in just under 2 square miles, already has at least 8 major grocery stores and tons of pharmacies. Lafayette Square, on the other hand, is being asked to lose its only ones. So one community gains convenience, while the other loses absolute necessities. And then, when you look at the demographics, another layer of this unequal burden just snaps into focus. West Hollywood is a community that is over 72% white. The area right around Lafayette Square, it's only about 18% white. So the crucial point that opponents are making is this. A predominantly minority community is being asked to sacrifice its resources and its stability for the benefit of a wealthier and much whiter one. And this is exactly why the residents there just completely reject the NIMBY label, not in my backyard. They're arguing this isn't about being anti-transit or anti-development at all. It's about challenging the fundamental fairness of a plan that asks them to absorb all the risk and all the loss, while another community gets to reap all the rewards. Now, to truly understand why this fight for Lafayette Square is so charged, you really have to look back in time. Because for so many people in this community, what's happening today feels like a painful, painful echo of a past trauma. The complete destruction of a neighborhood called Sugar Hill. So Sugar Hill, much like its famous namesake in Harlem, was this thriving, affluent Black neighborhood back in the 1940s. It was a place with beautiful homes, huge cultural significance. We're talking doctors, business leaders, and even Hollywood stars like Hattie McDaniel, the very first African-American to win an Oscar. The story of Sugar Hill is just this incredible high followed by a devastating low. In 1945, its residents won this landmark legal battle against racist housing covenants. I mean, it was a huge victory that helped pave the way for the Supreme Court to declare those covenants unenforceable all across the country. But then, just a few years later, the government used eminent domain to tear it all down. All of it. Just to build the 10 freeway. Just imagine watching your home, your entire neighborhood, just bulldozed into sand to make way for a freeway. The highway planners back then called areas like this blighted. But in reality, it was a prosperous Black community completely erased for a project that mainly served the brand new white suburbs. And here, this is the direct, absolutely gut-wrenching connection. Several of the children who lost their homes in Sugar Hill, the families who were lucky enough to get out and escape that destruction, they managed to relocate and rebuild their lives in Lafayette Square. And now, decades later, the city is proposing to tunnel directly under their new homes. This historical echo isn't just some clever metaphor. For some people, this is the trauma of a lifetime happening all over again. Which brings us right back to today. When residents raise these very valid concerns about tunneling under their 110-year-old homes, Metro often gives them a key piece of reassurance. But when you take a closer look at that reassurance, well, it reveals what critics are calling a really misleading double standard. So the line you'll hear over and over is this: "Hey, we successfully tunneled under the Walt Disney Concert Hall, so there's nothing to worry about." And yeah, on the surface, that sounds pretty convincing. But is it actually an honest comparison? Well, according to Metro's own documents, it's not even close. See, the Disney Concert Hall was classified as a special building. That means it got way stricter vibration limits, enhanced engineering, we're talking things like a floating slab track bed, and all this special testing to make sure it was protected. And the historic homes in Lafayette Square, they're just being treated under a standard residential category, with weaker limits and no special protections proposed. So look, the point here isn't that safe tunneling is impossible. The point is that Metro is using a deeply misleading comparison to try and create a false sense of security. They're pointing to a project where they used extraordinary measures as proof that just ordinary measures are good enough for Lafayette Square. And for the residents, that's not reassurance. That's just selective storytelling. And this feeling of being disregarded, it just gets worse when you look at Metro's institutional history and the public process for this project. Residents argue there's a clear pattern of behavior here that more than justifies their lack of trust. You can look at multiple major projects, the Red Line, the Crenshaw Line, the Regional Connector, and critics point to this same recurring four-step pattern. Step 1, assure the public everything will be fine. Step 2, damage inevitably happens. Step 3, blame the contractors or someone else. And step 4, only pay up after long, drawn-out public fights. And in this specific case, residents say the process has been just completely flawed from the very beginning. Lafayette Square was left out by name in key planning documents. The community says it wasn't properly consulted. There were last-minute meeting changes that made it harder for people to even show up and comment. And to top it all off, an alternative route that would have completely avoided their homes was just dismissed as having no substantial benefit, a conclusion the residents, as you can imagine, fiercely dispute. And this number, this really gives weight to their fears. Past Metro Rail projects have generated something like 2,440 insurance claims, totaling $120 million. For the people living in Lafayette Square, that is not an abstract statistic. That is a massive, flashing warning sign. Which leaves us with the final and really the unavoidable question that just hangs over this entire project. When you consider the history of Sugar Hill, when you look at the demographic disparities, the loss of essential services, the flawed public process, is Los Angeles, once again, asking a historic Black community to pay the price for someone else's priorities?